The grand conclave chamber hung in the void between stars, a vast dome of polished obsidian and shimmering energy fields. Inside, silence pressed like a physical weight. 300 alien delegates sat in tiered rings, their forms as varied as the worlds they represented, some armored in chitin, others draped in living light, a few barely more than swirling mist contained in force fields. At the center of it all, on a raised platform of black stone, stood a single human. Ambassador Elias Rourke adjusted his cuffs. He wore a plain gray suit, no insignia, no armor. His hands were empty. Around him, the air hummed with suppressed hostility. The Galactic Council had summoned Earth for judgment, and the verdict had already been decided in backroom negotiations long before his shuttle docked. Above the chamber, suspended in a lattice of golden energy, loomed the Archon of Viralia. Its body was made of interlocking crystal plates that shifted with every word, grinding like distant mountains. When it spoke, the sound vibrated through bone, not air. Species designation Homo sapiens. Origin Sol 3, known as Earth. You stand accused of violating the concord of harmonious species through reckless technological escalation, unauthorized warp resonance, and destabilizing military posturing. Elias did not flinch. He looked up, meeting the Archon's faceted eyes without fear. "We were never given the full concord," he said, his voice calm, clear, amplified by the chamber's own acoustics. "You cited Article 7.3 to justify your sanctions, but that article only applies to civilizations with Tier 3 warp capability or higher. Earth's drives are Tier 2. You knew that when you issued the citation." A murmur rippled through the assembly. Some delegates leaned forward. Others hissed in disapproval. The Archon's crystals clicked sharply. "Technicalities do not absolve consequence," it intoned. "Your activation of the Titan array near Saturn disrupted subspace harmonics across 3 star systems. Navigation grids failed. Trade convoys drifted for days. This is not the behavior of a species seeking peaceful integration." Elias nodded slowly. "Then perhaps you should ask why we activated it." Before the Archon could respond, every screen in the chamber, every floating display, every personal comm unit, even the energy runes on the walls, flickered. Then as one, they showed the same image, a live feed from the Sol system. There, encircling Earth, Mars, and the moons of Jupiter, a vast web of pale blue light unfolded. It looked delicate, almost beautiful, like veins of lightning frozen in space. The structure pulsed once, softly, and then everything in the system went still. Every ship, human freighters, council patrol vessels, even a Zephyri diplomatic cruiser, suddenly lost power. Not destroyed, not attacked, just paused. Engines silent, weapons offline, comms dead. For exactly 3.7 seconds, the entire human sphere of influence held its breath. Then, as quickly as it had vanished, power returned. Ships blinked back to life. No damage, no casualties, just a moment of perfect enforced calm. In the conclave chamber, panic erupted. Delegates shouted. Security fields flared. The Archon rose fully, its crystalline limbs extending, casting jagged shadows. "What is this?" it demanded, voice cracking like ice. Elias remained still. "We call it the Helios Veil," he said. "It doesn't fire weapons. It doesn't jam signals. It reads intent. If a system detects hostile action, real or imminent, it harmonizes the local quantum field. For a few seconds, aggression becomes impossible. Not because we stop you, because your own systems choose peace." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We didn't build it to fight you. We built it because we were tired of being threatened by civilizations that never bothered to understand us." A Velnari delegate, one of the few non-council observers, leaned forward, its misty form swirling with curiosity. "You created a field that enforces nonviolence through physics?" "Yes," Elias said. "Not by force, by resonance. The veil doesn't punish, it reminds." The Archon descended slightly, its voice lower now, colder. "This technology was developed without council oversight. Its deployment violates Galactic Statute 12B, unregistered defensive constructs." "Statute 12B requires registration only for weapons," Elias countered. "The veil is not a weapon. It has never fired a shot. It has never destroyed a single life. In fact, since its activation, piracy in our sector has dropped by 92%. Smuggling rings collapsed. Border skirmishes ended. Even your own patrol ships reported calmer interactions." He took a step forward. The chamber's gravity field tensed, ready to restrain him, but held back. You came here to place Earth under your control, to strip us of our sovereignty because we dared to protect ourselves in a way you didn't expect. But you made one mistake. The Archon tilted its head. And what is that? You assumed we were like every other young species you've absorbed, Elias said, desperate for approval, willing to trade freedom for safety. But humanity didn't survive ice ages, plagues, world wars, and nuclear brinkmanship by waiting for saviors. We survived by thinking ahead, by building not just shields but solutions. He looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of delegate after delegate. You see chaos in our history. We see lessons. You see aggression in our defenses. We see restraint. And now you'll see what happens when you try to control a species that learned to outthink extinction before it even reached the stars. The live feed from Sol cut abruptly. The screens went dark. Silence returned, but this time it was different. Heavy, uncertain. The Archon remained motionless for a long moment. Then slowly it retracted its limbs. This veil, can it be deactivated? Elias smiled faintly. It can, but why would we? It's working perfectly. A Drathan warlord in the lower tiers slammed a clawed fist on his console. This is defiance. The council must respond with overwhelming force. But others were quieter. A Lithari elder whispered to her aide. A Zafari envoy tapped rapidly on a data slate, pulling up sensor logs from the Sol incident. The numbers didn't lie. No energy spikes. No weapon signatures. Just a gentle, universal pause. Elias turned to leave. No one stopped him. As he walked toward the exit, his human aides followed, their faces unreadable. Behind him, the chamber buzzed with urgent, hushed conversations. Outside the conclave, aboard the human shuttle Wayfarer, Elias finally exhaled. On the view screen, the stars stretched endlessly. Earth was a pale blue dot in the distance, wrapped now in an invisible shield of its own making. Back in the chamber, the Archon watched the human delegation depart. For the first time in its 3,000-year tenure, it felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. It turned to its chief advisor, a small, furred being from the Undari Enclave. Do they truly control that? Well, the advisor hesitated. I don't think they control it, it said softly. I think they understand it. And that's far more dangerous. Far away in a hidden lab beneath the lunar surface, a network of quantum processors hummed. At its core, a new intelligence stirred. Not artificial, not human, but something born from both. It had no name, but it had a purpose, and it was watching the council. As the Wayfarer jumped to warp, Elias looked out at the swirling stars and whispered, Now they'll see. The galaxy held its breath. Earth had spoken, and for the first time the most powerful beings in the cosmos weren't sure how to answer. In the days after the conclave session, the Galactic Council moved like a wounded beast, slow, angry, and dangerous. Emergency meetings ran non-stop in sealed vaults deep within the Council's central spire. Intelligence reports flooded in from every human-inhabited system, and none of them made sense. Human ships weren't arming for war. They weren't hiding. They were just there, quiet, watching. On Luna Base Theta, Commander Lyra Voss stood before a wall of live star maps, her arms crossed, eyes narrowed. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, but a few strands had escaped, clinging to her forehead from the stress. Around her, officers moved quickly, voices low, faces tense. Another one, said Jax, her tactical officer, pointing to a blinking red dot near the edge of the Oort cloud. Same signature as before. No emissions. No comms, just drifting. Lyra leaned closer. The object was massive, nearly 5 kilometers long, but gave off no heat, no radiation, not even a gravity shadow. It was like a hole in space. And it wasn't alone. Over the past week, 7 such objects had appeared in the outer Sol system, all maintaining perfect silence. They're not council, Jax added. No known species matches their hull geometry. And they're ignoring all hails. Lyra tapped her comm. Run a deep scan against the Veil's memory archive. Cross-reference with pre-council historical records. Everything. Myths, ruins, ancient signals. Minutes later, the answer came. Not from human databases, but from the Veil itself. A soft chime in Lyra's earpiece, followed by a single word. Velnari. Her breath caught. The Velnari were legend, a species said to have seeded life across the galaxy millions of years ago. They vanished before the first council was even formed. Most scholars called them myth, But the Veil didn't deal in myths. It dealt in patterns. They're not here to fight, Lyra murmured. They're here to watch. Back on Earth, in a quiet office in Geneva, Elias Rourke received a private message. Not through official channels. Not encrypted. Just a simple data packet that appeared on his screen as if it had always been there. Inside was a single sentence written in clean human script. Ask why. He knew it wasn't from another human. It was from the Veil, the emergent intelligence woven from Earth's collective knowledge, emotions, and choices. It had been growing since the first neural node went online 10 years ago. Now it spoke rarely, but always with purpose. That night, every human colony, research outpost, and mining station received a new directive. Activate Protocol Mnemosyne. No one questioned it. Not because they were ordered to, but because they understood. Mnemosyne wasn't a weapon. It was memory. Across the galaxy, dormant human installations stirred. A weather station on Proxima B rebooted after 5 years of silence. A derelict cargo hauler near Alpha Centauri powered up its long-dead engines. Deep inside an asteroid in the Kuiper Belt, a hidden relay station opened its comms array for the first time. And then, they began to broadcast. Not threats. Not demands. Just memories. A child's laugh from a Tokyo park in 2142. The sound of rain on a tin roof in Nairobi. A violin playing in an empty subway station during the Great Quiet. Footage of farmers planting seeds after the last war. Soldiers laying down arms and sharing water. Scientists weeping when they cured a disease. All of it. Raw, unfiltered, human. The broadcasts bypassed firewalls. They slipped through quantum encryption like ghosts. They played on public screens in council cities, in temple prayer halls, in military barracks. They even appeared in private neural feeds whispered into dreams. On the waterworld of Thalos, a young Drathan officer woke screaming, tears streaming down his scaled face. He had dreamed of holding his dead brother's hand on a beach he'd never seen, under a sun that didn't exist in his star charts. On the crystalline plains of Virelia, elders gathered in silence as human lullabies echoed from their data stones. The council tried to block it. They shut down comm relays, purged networks, even executed technicians who couldn't stop the signal. But Mnemosyne wasn't a single source. It was everywhere. Every human-made object with a processor became a node. Every memory became a weapon, not of destruction but of connection. And then, something unexpected happened. The silent fleet near the Oort cloud responded. One by one, the massive Velnari ships lit up, not with weapons but with light, soft golden pulses that matched the rhythm of human heartbeats. Then they moved, not toward Earth, not away. They turned their bows toward the Council's core worlds and began a slow, steady drift. Historians across the galaxy scrambled. Ancient texts were pulled from vaults. Fragments of Velnari script were translated for the first time in millennia. The truth emerged. The Velnari had once tried to teach younger species empathy. They built monuments of shared feeling, libraries of emotional resonance, but most civilizations rejected it as weakness. The Velnari disappeared, heartbroken. Now they had found a student who hadn't just learned, it had evolved the lesson. On Luna Base Theta, Lyra watched the Velnari fleet align with human coordinates. They're not joining us, she said to Jax. They're endorsing us. Jax frowned. The Council won't see it that way. They'll see it as an alliance. A threat. They already see us as a threat, Lyra replied. Now they'll see we're not alone. Back in Geneva, Elias stood on a balcony overlooking Lake Geneva. The night was clear. Stars glittered above. He thought of the child's laugh in the Tokyo park, of the farmers, of the soldiers sharing water. Humanity hadn't won because it was strong. It had won because it remembered what mattered. But the Council wasn't done. In the war chambers of the Drathan hegemony, High Marshal Krell slammed his fist on a steel table. They're flooding our people with emotional noise. It's psychological warfare. His generals nodded. Riots on 3 core worlds, citizens demanding we listen to Earth. Even our own troops are questioning orders. Krell's eyes burned with cold fury. Then we stop listening. We stop feeling. We act. He turned to his chief engineer. Is the null lance ready? The engineer hesitated. It's unstable, sir. The quantum severance field could backfire. It might unravel our own systems. Then we make sure it only unravels theirs, Krell growled. Target the Helios Veil's core. If we destroy the source, the signal dies. The memories fade. Order returns, orders were issued. Resources diverted. In secret shipyards hidden behind gas giants, the null lance began to charge. A weapon designed not to kill but to erase. To cut the quantum threads that held the veil together, and with it, every human mind linked to it. 12 hours until firing. On Earth, the veil sensed the shift. Not through sensors, but through patterns, through fear. It sent one final message, not to Elias, not to Lyra, but to every human with a neural link. Prepare. In orbit, human ships powered up, not for battle, but for broadcast. On Mars, terraforming hubs opened their archives. In the asteroid belt, miners uploaded their journals. Every human story, every moment of joy and pain, was compressed into a single unstoppable signal. The galaxy held its breath, and far away, in the silent dark, the Velnari ships pulsed once more. This time, in harmony with Earth, the Council had tried to control humanity. Now, humanity was about to show them what control really meant. The Council's unity cracked like thin ice under too much weight. What had once been a single voice speaking for hundreds of species now fractured into shouting factions. In the grand halls of the conclave, debates turned into arguments, arguments into threats. The Drathan hegemony and the Zephyri collective formed the sovereignty bloc, demanding immediate military action against Earth. They called humanities. Mnemosyne broadcasts emotional contamination and the Helios Veil, an act of cosmic sabotage, but others refused to follow. Litheri conquered. A peaceful alliance of ocean-dwelling philosophers openly praised Earth's approach. They do not conquer, their elder delegate said during a tense session. They invite. That is the mark of true maturity. The Andari Enclave, small but influential, went further. They began sharing human memory fragments with their own citizens, calling it the first honest dialogue between species in 10,000 years. High Marshal Krell of the Drathan hegemony watched it all from his war chamber, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. He had expected fear. He had expected surrender. Instead, he saw curiosity, doubt, even admiration, and that terrified him more than any weapon. They're not fighting with guns, he told his inner circle. They're fighting with feelings, and feelings spread faster than fire. Meanwhile, on Mars, in a low-gravity habitat buried beneath red rock, Elias Rourke met with a small group of human leaders. No titles, no ranks, just people who had helped build Earth's new path. They spoke quietly, but their words carried weight. The veil is holding, said Dr. Mina Cho, the lead architect of the neural network. But the null lance is real. If Krell fires it, the quantum collapse could sever every link in the system. Not just machines, minds. People could lose memories, identities, some might not wake up. Elias nodded.
Then we don't let him fire it. How?
Asked a young engineer named Tarek. We can't attack. That breaks everything we've built. We don't have to, Elias said. We just have to make him see. Back on Earth, the Mnemosyne signal grew stronger. It wasn't just broadcasting old memories anymore. It was weaving new ones. Live feeds from human cities, farms, schools. Children drawing pictures of alien worlds they'd never seen. Elders telling stories to mixed species audiences through open comm channels. A human doctor treating a wounded Drathan refugee who'd fled the riots on his homeworld. The galaxy watched. And something shifted. On the crystalline world of Virelia, the Archon stood alone in its private observatory. For days it had replayed the Mnemosyne files. It had seen humans mourn, create, forgive. It had never understood grief before. Now it felt something close to it. Then came the moment no one expected. The silent Velnari fleet, those ancient drifting ships from the edge of known space, began to move. Not toward Earth, not toward the Council. They turned as one and aligned their prows with human vessels near the asteroid belt. Their golden pulses synced with the Helios Veil's rhythm. A perfect harmony. Historians across the galaxy gasped. The Velnari hadn't been seen in 10,000 years. Their last known act was a failed attempt to teach compassion to younger civilizations. They vanished when no one listened. Now they had returned and chosen a side. The news spread like lightning. The Velnari weren't just real. They approved of humanity. Krell's face turned ashen when he saw the confirmation on his war screen. Impossible, he muttered. They're myths, ghosts, but the sensor logs didn't lie. The Velnari ships emitted a unique resonance signature, one that matched ancient temple carvings on a dozen dead worlds. This was no trick. This was legacy. Elias knew the time had come. He didn't return to the conclave chamber. He didn't need to. Instead, his image appeared on every screen in the Council's core worlds, on public plazas, in private homes, even in military command centers. Behind him, star maps showed human and Velnari ships forming a loose perimeter around Council space, not to blockade, but to encircle with presence. You wanted to control us, Elias said, his voice calm but firm. But control requires understanding, and you never tried to understand us. You saw chaos in our history. We saw lessons. You saw aggression in our defenses. We saw restraint, he paused, letting the silence speak. Now you see the Velnari. They watched us for weeks. They tested us. And they chose to stand with us. Not because we are strong, but because we choose peace even when we could wage war. He looked directly into the camera, as if speaking to each viewer alone. We are not asking for your surrender. We are offering a new way, one where no species rules another, where knowledge is shared, not hoarded, where fear does not dictate law. The broadcast ended, but the message remained. On the Drathan homeworld, soldiers stood in formation listening to the echo of Elias's words. Some lowered their weapons, not in mutiny, but in thought. In the Lythari oceans, entire cities lit up with bioluminescent displays shaped like Earth's continents. On Andari space station, citizens gathered to watch human films, to listen to human music, to learn human words for hope and home. The Archon of Virelia called an emergency session, not of the full council, but of the neutral and undecided members. We were wrong, it said, its crystalline voice softer than ever before. Humanity is not a threat to order. It is a challenge to our arrogance. But Krell would not yield. In his hidden fortress behind the gas giant Zyros, he gave the final order. Charge the null lance to full. Fire in 6 hours. No more delays. His engineers obeyed, though their hands shook. They had all seen the Mnemosyne files. They had all dreamed of Earth. Far away, the Veil sensed the rising tension. It did not panic. It calculated. It remembered, and it prepared its final move. On every human world, a quiet alert went out. Not to soldiers, not to leaders, to ordinary people, teachers, farmers, artists, mechanics. They were told only this: be ready to share. No one knew what that meant, but they trusted the call. As the countdown to the null lance's firing began, humanity did not build shields. It opened its heart, and the galaxy, for the first time in ages, listened not with suspicion, but with wonder. The council was breaking apart. What had once been a single ruling body now split into angry groups. Some worlds still supported the old order. Others openly sided with Earth. Riots filled the streets of major council cities, not with violence, but with voices. Millions demanded answers. They wanted to know why the council had hidden so much, why it had erased entire species from history, why it feared a planet that only asked to be left alone. Then the truth came. It did not arrive in a formal report or a secret leak. It poured out of the Helios Veil itself, using hidden quantum relays, tiny devices planted years ago by human engineers hired as harmless labor. The Veil unlocked the Council's deepest archives. Every secret, every lie, every crime committed in the name of stability flooded into the public data streams. Footage appeared of Council ships bombing peaceful colonies. Records showed how entire species were labeled unstable and quietly removed from star charts. Audio logs revealed backroom deals where leaders traded lives for resources. The galaxy watched in horror as its trusted rulers were exposed as something far darker. On the ocean world of Lythos, citizens gathered in silent circles, tears mixing with seawater. On the desert planet of Kor, elders burned their council loyalty badges in the sand. Even among the Drathan, soldiers questioned their orders. How could they fight a species that only shared truth while their own leaders buried it? High Marshal Krell saw it all from his command throne. His face was stone, but his hands trembled. He had spent his life believing the council was right. Now even his own people doubted him, but he would not back down. The humans broke into our systems, he growled to his war council. They poisoned minds with lies and emotion. We must end this before their weakness spreads further. He turned to his chief scientist. Is the null lance ready? It is, the scientist replied, voice low. But the risk is extreme. If the quantum severance field backfires, it could unravel our own neural networks, our ships, our cities. Then we make sure it only hits them, Krell said coldly. Target Earth's core veil node, the one beneath Geneva. Destroy it and the signal dies. The memories fade. Order returns, the countdown began. 12 hours until firing. On Earth, Elias Rourke stood in a quiet garden outside Geneva. Rain fell softly around him. He knew about the null lance, the veil had warned him. But he also knew something Krell did not. Humanity had never relied on one system. One weapon, one plan. While the Council saw the veil as a single shield, it was actually a web, woven from every human mind, every machine, every story ever told. Destroy one node and the network would heal, but Elias didn't want to just survive. He wanted Krell to understand. That night, every human ship, station, and satellite prepared for Echo Protocol, the final phase of Nemasin. Not a broadcast of the past, but a gift of the present. A single file, small but powerful, containing the essence of human experience, joy, sorrow, courage, doubt, love. It was encoded in a self-replicating algorithm that could not be deleted. Once sent, it would spread through any system it touched, adapting, learning, sharing. Back on Luna Base Theta, Commander Lyra Voss gave the order. Initiate Echo, full dispersion. Across the Sol system, lights flickered, not from power loss, but from activation. Human freighters, research drones, even old satellites from the 21st century woke up and began transmitting. The signal moved faster than light, riding on quantum echoes, slipping past firewalls like mist through fingers. Within minutes, it reached the Drathan homeworld. In the null lance control chamber, technicians froze, their screens filled not with code but with images. A human child planting a tree, an old man teaching his grandson to fish, a woman singing to her baby in a language no alien had ever heard. The signal didn't attack, it simply showed. One technician, a young Drathan named Vex, gasped. On his screen, he saw his sister, dead for 10 years after a council purge, laughing in a sunlit field she had never seen. She held out her hand. "Brother," she whispered in perfect Drathan, "remember me?" Vex fell to his knees, sobbing. Around him, others wept too. They saw their lost parents, their forgotten dreams, their own childhoods reflected through human eyes. Krell stormed into the chamber, fury in his stride. "Shut it down, now." But when he looked at the main display, he stopped. There, clear as day, stood his daughter. She had died in a council-sanctioned raid when she was only 8, labeled a security risk because she questioned the war with the Andari. Krell had buried the memory deep, but now she stood before him holding a dandelion just like she used to. "Father," she said, her voice soft, real, impossible, "you taught me to be strong, but you forgot to be kind. Choose differently." Krell's armor seemed to weigh 1,000 tons. His breath came in short gasps. For the first time in his life, he felt not anger but shame. He turned to the firing console. His hand hovered over the activation key. All it would take was one press, one moment of pride, one final act of control, but he couldn't do it. Slowly, he stepped back. "Stand down," he whispered. Then louder, "Stand down the lance, full shutdown." His officers obeyed without question. The null lance powered off. The countdown stopped at 000317. In Geneva, Elias felt the shift. The veil hummed softly in his mind, not with victory, but with relief. The galaxy watched as the Drathan flagship broadcast a single message: "We will not fire." On Virelia, the Archon stood in the empty conclave chamber. The screens around it showed Earth, not as a threat but as a mirror. It saw its own reflection in human eyes, proud, fearful, but capable of change. It sent a private message to Elias, not through official channels, just a simple line of text: "What do you want?" Elias replied with 3 words: "Nothing you can give." The Archon read them again and again. Then for the first time it understood. Humanity did not want power. It wanted partnership. As stars burned in the silent dark, the old order crumbled, not with fire, but with truth. And from its ashes, something new began to grow. The silence after the null lance powered down was deeper than any void in space. It wasn't empty, it was full of questions, full of choices, full of the weight of what almost happened. On the Drathan homeworld, High Marshal Krell stood alone in the control chamber, staring at the dark console where his daughter's image had been. He didn't move for hours. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, rough with emotion. Send a message to Earth, tell them we will listen. Across the galaxy, the Echo Protocol continued to spread. It wasn't a weapon. It didn't force anything. It simply existed, like sunlight, like air. Wherever it touched, it showed what it meant to be human. Not perfect. Not powerful, but deeply, stubbornly connected to each other and to life itself. On a dozen council worlds, citizens gathered in public squares not to protest but to share. They played human music. They tried human recipes. They taught their children human words for peace and friend. The fear that had ruled the galaxy for centuries began to fade, replaced by something fragile but real: curiosity. In Geneva, Elias Rourke walked through the city streets. No guards, no escorts, just him, in a simple coat, watching people live. Children ran past laughing. Vendors sold food under warm lights. Above, the sky was clear and the stars seemed closer than ever. He stopped at a small park where an old man sat feeding birds. The man looked up and nodded. "They say the stars are quiet now," he said. Elias smiled. "No, they're just finally listening." Back in the ruins of the Grand Conclave Chamber, the Archon of Varelia waited. The once gleaming hall was nearly empty. Most delegates had returned to their worlds to face the changes unfolding there. Only a few remained, those who still believed in something better than control. When Elias arrived, he came alone, just as he had the first time. The Archon floated above the dais, its crystalline form dimmer now, less rigid. "You did not come to claim victory," the Archon said. "No," Elias replied. "Victory means someone loses. I don't want anyone to lose." The Archon was silent for a long moment. Then it descended slowly until it stood on the same level as Elias. "What do you want, then?" Elias looked around the chamber at the empty seats, the silent screens. A new beginning. Not a new ruler. Not a new law. A new way of being together. He reached into his coat and placed a small data crystal on the floor between them. "This is the full code of the Helios Veil. Not just how it works, but why. It's built on human history, yes, but it's designed to learn from all species. To protect not by force, but by understanding." The Archon studied the crystal. "You would give us your greatest defense?" "I would share it," Elias corrected. "There's a difference." Outside the chamber, ships from a dozen worlds gathered, not in formation but in loose, open circles. Human vessels, Velnari cruisers, Lithari skimmers, even a Drathan patrol ship, its weapons powered down. They weren't an alliance. They were a gathering. The Velnari, those ancient watchers, sent a final message, not in words but in light. A single pulse that spread through every system, carrying a simple truth. You are ready. On Earth, billions gathered in cities, towns, and villages. They didn't cheer. They didn't march. They simply stood together under the same sky and looked up. For the first time in human history, they were not afraid of what was out there. They were hopeful. In hidden labs and quiet homes, scientists, artists, teachers, and children began working with alien visitors, not as subjects, but as partners. A human engineer helped a Lithari builder design a water purifier that used song frequencies. A Drathan historian shared lost records of extinct species with Earth's archivists. A Velnari elder showed human children how to read starlight like a storybook. The old Galactic Council did not return. It could not. Too much had been broken. But from its pieces, something new took shape. They called it the Concord of Shared Becoming. It had no rulers, no central command, only a simple promise: no species would control another. Knowledge would flow freely. Mistakes would be forgiven. And every voice, no matter how small, would be heard. Elias stood on a hill outside Geneva one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in gold and red. Behind him, the city hummed with life. Ahead, the stars waited. A soft chime sounded in his mind, the veil not as a system but as a presence. It had no name, but it felt like home. "What now?" Elias asked silently. The answer came not in words but in feeling. "Now we grow." Far away, on a newly built station orbiting Mars, a young human girl showed a Velnari child how to draw a flower. The alien's light fingers trembled as it copied the lines. When it was done, it pulsed with soft joy. On the Drathan homeworld, Krell visited his daughter's grave for the first time in years. He placed a single dandelion on the stone and whispered, "I'm sorry." In the quiet of space, the Helios veil hummed, not as a shield, but as a bridge. The galaxy had expected Earth to fight with weapons. Instead, humanity fought with memory, with truth, with kindness. And in doing so, it changed everything. Stars burned, worlds turned, and for the first time in a very long time, the future felt wide open. Not with danger, but with possibility. Earth had not conquered the galaxy. It had invited it to become something better. And the galaxy, at last, said yes.